Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're making rice and peas with oxtails. As you can see, I also have chicken because I'm cooking stewed chicken as well. So the very first step is to make sure that you wash and clean your meats. Since I just purchased the meat from the meat store, I want to make sure that I'm able to soak it and defrost it for a little bit before I go ahead and clean and season it. So as you can see, I'm washing the water off, but I'm also looking at the pieces to make sure everything is okay and to my liking. And then I'm going to put it to soak for a little bit to defrost. So I did defrost the meat for about 15 to 20 minutes. As you can see, I am pouring off the excess water and I'm just going to keep washing it. And now I am going to clean it. I am very big on safety for food and making sure my meat is cleaned properly. I have lemon, I have lime. I am going to use lemon for today and I am going to use vinegar. It is time to season our oxtails, baby, and I am starting off with my complete seasoning. Then I'm going to add my Mrs. Dash. Now, this Mrs. Dash does not contain salt. Then I'm going to add my black pepper. And then I am going to add my seasoning salt. Now, I am not going to put a lot of seasoning salt on it just because all the other seasonings that I am using in total contain salt except for Mrs. Dash and the black pepper, of course. So you're just going to make sure that you rub the seasoning into the meat. You want to get everything covered. And lastly, I am going to add my all-purpose seasoning. I'm big on taste and flavor, so I want to make sure that my meat is seasoned to perfection. The final step to this is to add the browning, and that's how you get that dark color. So I did go back to repeat the same steps I used by adding all of the same seasonings and a little bit of browning. So I'm going to let the seasoning marinate in the meat. I'm going to remove my gloves, wash my hands, and start on the next step. Now it is time for me to cut up the other seasonings that I have. I do have garlic, onions, bell pepper, scotch bonnet pepper, thyme, and scallion. And I have everything washed except for the garlic and onions, which I will wash once I get to them. As you can see, I added more scallion just because I'm making a lot of food, a lot of meat. So I want to make sure I have enough seasoning for my meat. I'm just stepping away to make sure that I peel the onion properly and then wash it to start cutting it up. So I'm also making stewed chicken. I decided to use a whole onion, chop it up in half. You do not have to use a whole onion if you're just making your oxtails, but it really depends on the amount of meat that you have. I'm just moving back and forth to the trash to make sure that everything is being disposed properly. I do not like cooking in a messy kitchen, and I have to make sure that I wash everything off. So that's what you see me doing there. Usually I'll add more seasonings like red pepper, yellow pepper, orange pepper, tomatoes for my stewed chicken, but my main focus for this video is my oxtails. Now that I have my seasonings chopped up, this is a part that I enjoy doing. I like to fry my oxtails just a tad bit. So I fry them for 2 to 3 minutes on each side, just so it can have that nice brown color. After 2 to 3 minutes, I am flipping the oxtails over, and I'm just going to repeat that step until I'm finished with all the oxtails that I have in my pan. When I am all done, I'm going to put the meat in a pressure cooker. The pressure cooker is very important because it helps tenderize the meat. And so I just add some water, put the lid on it, and let it pressure cook for about 30 minutes. So I took out 2 bowls out the cabinet, washed them, and we're going to add our rice. And I also have my red peas. I'm going to use the whole pack of red peas. And I am going to add a little bit more rice because I am cooking a lot of food. So I want to make sure that I have enough rice. Now, personally, I like to wash until the water is clear, so you will see me washing a lot of times. You don't have to wash as many times as I wash my rice. This is just my preference. Okay, so this is the last time, I promise. So depending on the pressure cooker that you use, you want to make sure that you run water, cool water over it, because the pressure cooker is locked. If you open the pressure cooker while it's still on the stove, it will explode. So run the water over it, then you're able to open it. Once you open up the pressure cooker, you're going to check to make sure that your meat is to your liking. You don't want the meat too hard and you don't want it to be too soft, so you check to make sure it's to your liking. It wasn't to mine, so I had to put it back on the stove for about 15 minutes. In the meantime, I am going to peel and cut up my carrots to add to my oxtails later on. As you can see, I am only using 2 carrots. You can always add more carrots, it's definitely up to you. For some reason, I cannot find the peeler that I have in this house. And every time I go to the grocery store, I always forget to buy a peeler to make my life easier. Clearly, I like to just do things the long and hard way. I personally don't like having big chunks of carrots in my oxtail, so that's why you see me cutting in a slanted form and in a small medium size. So now I'm going to transfer my oxtails from the pressure cooker back to my Dutch pot. This is the same Dutch pot I used to fry the oxtails earlier. I just rewashed it. Like I mentioned, I'm really big on safety, so I'm always cooking and cleaning at the same time. I'm going to remove some of that water out of the pot later on. I just added garlic, bell peppers, thyme, and onions, and I am going to let that cook inside of the pot. As you can see, I am removing the gravy from the pot. It is a bit too much, so I'm just gonna take a few scoops out. Now it is time for me to pressure cook the red beans. I only have one pressure cooker, so I have to wash and go at the same time. But if you don't have a pressure cooker, you can always use a regular pot. It just takes longer. So even for the oxtails, it'll take like 2 to 3 hours. I'm going to let my red beans pressure cook for about 20 minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to work on my splinters, which is pretty much dumplings, and it is for the oxtail. So I have my flour. I'm going to add some salt and add water. I had a difficult time making my splinters, my dough for my splinters, because I put too much water. So you will see me struggling in this video to make sure I get the proper consistency that I need for this dough to make my splinters. You don't want your dough to be sticky. You want it to have like a nice flow to it. So I am going to add more flour to get that nice thickness that I need to it, because when it's time for you to start spinning, you don't want it to stick to the palm of your hands. You want it to just roll and go. You want to be able to roll and go. So I was struggling because my head is so heavy and I kept adding way more water than I needed. But eventually I got it together. I was finally able to get it together. After letting the seasonings cook for a little bit, you're going to add your butter beans. You want to make sure that you open up your can and drain the water prior to placing the butter beans inside the pot. Then I am going to add my carrots to the pot, stir, and make sure I let the carrots and butter beans cook properly. Now I'm going to add my spinners to the pot. Now spinners are supposed to be a little smaller than the size that I am using. I honestly got tired of spinning and trying to get this thing flowing, so I made them a little big, but they are usually smaller than the size that I'm making them. So the same steps that I took for my oxtails is pretty much the same steps for the red peas. I want to make sure that it is to my liking, and it was to my liking. So I'm going to add my coconut milk. I have my scallion, my thyme, garlic. I'm going to add salt, and I'm going to add some butter. And you just want to make sure you stir and let that cook for a little bit. Then you are going to add your rice and scotch bonnet pepper after. It's an important step when making your rice. You want to make sure that you do not add too much water. You want to make sure that you're able to see the rice through the water. And so you're just going to close the lid and let it cook and steam. The oxtail is pretty much done cooking. As you can see, the gravy is a little watery, so I just like to add a tad bit of flour to thicken up the gravy. So now you see that the gravy is nice and thick, and that is to my liking. Now that I am all done, it is time for me to check on the rice, and the rice is nice and fluffy. I'm just stirring to make sure that everything is good, and now it is time to eat. The plate are going with things in a that plate turn up and sell boy.